Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our live session. Hello, Richard. How are you doing?
Hello, Alexander. Thank you. Good. You too.
Yes,
So
thank
far,
you.
so good. Hmm?
Yeah, so far so good. Exactly. So, we're attempting today to talk about our
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to
understanding
our.
of effort and versus grace, and what we mean by that, we want to start off explaining as well.
Yes.
Hmm. So let's start with effort. Why do we put effort in? What makes us, put effort into our life, into our work, into our situation?
Yeah, I would like to start a little bit with the definitions, maybe. What do we mean with effort? What do we mean with grace? And yeah.
That's what I meant. Like, what
So,
is it exactly with the effort? Sorry to be interrupting you.
mm,
Like to me, when I think of effort, I'll give you the space in a second. To me, if I think of effort, it means like I want to put some muscle into something. I want to put some work into what is a goal for me. How do you see effort, Richard?
um, yeah, I think it's a question of the relation to these at least two terms. So, Um, success for most people means you have a certain goal that you want to reach, and then you reach that goal. It doesn't matter if this is in fitness, in finances, in spirituality, um,
Mhm.
or in which area you want to look at. But before we came on this call, an interesting thing came up to me. For example, let's take the Buddha as an example. Yeah. The Buddha wanted to reach enlightenment. Let's call it like this. It was his goal that he wanted to achieve. And it took him a long time. It took him a lot of effort and a lot of adjustments on the way. So it was not just, okay, he was sitting down for 2 weeks and then enlightenment hit him. And from then on, everything was perfect. So it took him years and years and years of practice, meditation, of adjustment of his efforts. And this is also what led him to, I think it's the wrong term in this sense, success in enlightenment. But you know what I mean? So it's also from experience, what I've seen with people and from my own experience. If you want to be, let's say it like this, dedicate something the most you can, or or do the most you can in a certain area, it needs effort. It needs dedication and action on a more or less daily basis.
With consistency. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's a very clever example you brought to the table in a sense that I know like we think of Buddha as the calm person who sits in front of a tree where all his, like where everything went through his mind, but uh, little did I know until recently, like a few years back, until I understood it, that he actually tried everything. Like he tried from adjusting his meals to almost starvation. He did severe practices, which we would call yoga practices these days. And so on that level, that's truly, what you're saying, he put in effort, he put in a physical effort, so to speak, like put all his attention into practices to see what's gonna come out, to see if he can land there. And only after the practices, I think, came what we want to also talk about. I would say it was almost grace that he understood because a woman came by and offered him something to eat, and he was like very austere. He wouldn't eat much. And when he took the food, his students were really appalled and, and said, like, why are you taking this food? And he said, well, I had this realization, and that realization was, that it doesn't take the effort. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to throw in another Buddha story here.
Okay, cool.
So Buddha was sitting on the side of a river, yeah, and or besides the river, and then he was looking at a boat coming, or a little, yeah, something like this, a boat. And a person there was playing an instrument.
Okay.
And on this, then he saw, in his mind, it went on like this, the story. If I tune the string too high, it's gonna break. If I tune the string too low, it's also not gonna sound well.
Mm.
So I think this is a huge wisdom in life. You have to know how to tune your strings well on a day-to-day basis in every single area of your life. And
Mm.
that's a big thing to do.
We could use that story while we're talking about the right amount of effort, so to
Mhm.
speak. Yeah. And I think what one has to understand to keep the string alive, you also have to let it, soften at times. I know you don't classically do that with instruments, but I know that there is a similar story around like the warriors, the great warriors like Arjun and so on, like that they have a bow and the bow has like a string, and when you don't loosen the string, it won't be able to shoot all the time. If it's constantly, put on a very tight mode, then you know, they can't use it for very long. So I think to me, this is also an important thing, when can you let go? When can you soften for something to work again? That's what I find is super important in life. Yeah.
And it's also a practical thing because for a classical guitar, for example, if
Mm.
you're not playing the guitar, you're supposed to tune the strings lower, not completely
Ah.
to, yeah, but
Mm.
but a little bit lower so that there's not so much tension on it. And I think this is a perfect example for life too.
Mm.
But what I saw with a lot of people is that I think what they consider as effort and a lot of effort, honestly, to me, is not a lot of effort. People give up too quickly. I've hardly seen anybody give up too late, but most people give up too early in the journey. And there are so many stories, let's say it like this, you're really struggling, you really want something to happen. And for example, then you're giving your best and you start to pray, oh my God, please help me um, to manifest this or get to my goal. And it's because you're exhausted, because you gave all you had to give, then something came in and helped you. So this is a very interesting observation that I have, that it's sometimes happening like this. Not always, but sometimes.
What I'm hearing you say, Richard, is that only if we exhaust ourselves, we can get grace.
Um, it's not like this at all, but there is one thing. If you never exhaust yourself in something, then you don't know where your boundaries are. So if you never push the boundaries that you think are your reality in the present moment, how would you know where your boundaries are in general? Because if you're not, let's say it like this, if you want to go on a 10-kilometer walk and okay, you manage to do 5 kilometers, then you know, oh, okay, that's my present boundary for now. But if you never try, how would you know?
And this is what came to mind for me, like if we're staying on the effort part of it all, is I think when we use effort, we go back to tools that we know and the way we moved forward. But effort can also consist of, like reining in other tools, other methods, like you could, for example, say like, okay, you walked 5K and you just kind of sit down and you massage your feet and you put a plaster on and you hydrate well, and then you see if you can walk another kilometer or something like that, so effort in this sense could consist of looking at the world anew and looking for maybe support or other tools, as I called it, to help you to get on to in your effort to your goal. So
Um, I didn't, from meaning wise, didn't really understand the last part you said. And I also want to throw in here, please, if somebody has questions, feel free to ask questions in the chat.
yeah, exactly. Welcome to join this communication or this conversation around effort. So what I'm trying to say is that when I think of, for in your example, what came up in me, it was exhaustion, for example. You can't walk any further because of exhaustion. And exhaustion is real for people, like it's nothing nobody can say, you're exhausted, keep going. We're not, it's not a military drill, but it's a way of saying, I am exhausted. What can I do to like get out of my exhaustion and make the other half of the goal, so to speak. So that's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes we have to look over the boundaries we set in our mind. So I'm exhausted, that's a sign I shouldn't move on. I shouldn't put more effort in, but we need to look for new solutions. And they can look like support, like a massage, for example, or somebody bringing you a drink so you can keep walking and hydrate. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I also see it differently because, yes, this could be one approach. Another approach that's, I think, a little bit more fundamental is recognize or be the observer of your exhaustion. What happens then? Because let's say it like this, your body feels exhausted, you start to feel tired, and then it's not just the exhaustion of the body, then suddenly your mind comes in and says, oh my God, what's the story about it? I have to do this. That's my experience. Then all your experiences come in and tell you, this is reality about exhaustion, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Or maybe your mind comes in and you start to believe all of this thinking process of, I can do this or I cannot do this. The question is for me, if you want to jump in a little bit deeper here, what happens to the exhaustion if you become the observer of the exhaustion?
Absolutely.
Because, mhm, a
Absolutely.
lo-
What you mean? Hmm.
yeah, and a lot of energy in general goes away for the process or into the process of believing our stories. And I can give you a personal example. Let's say it like this, a few years ago, I could not do what I do in one day now in a week.
Hmm.
This is around the things. I think the time frame you can compare. Yeah.
Hmm.
I can do stuff in one day now that I could not do in a week because the less story you put into your life and how easy or how difficult things should be, and you deal with what is, there's an immense power in this.
Absolutely, but sometimes the conditioning is so strong in some things that the system doesn't allow you to do that, like, yeah, so mainly even if you try to come into that part of the observer, which is a meditative kind of technique in some ways to me, then it can happen, but sometimes the effort to pass by the emotions that are there that are kind of conditioned and come along with that self-belief, can block the way of staying in the observing mode. That's what I'm saying with getting help as well, so getting a new perspective.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't work that way that you bypass them. You have to be in them and watch them. And that's easier one day than on another day. Yeah. And here Uli wrote, be totally in, go lightly. That's how he approaches this or sees this. And I think for all of us, sometimes it's so lovely. There's such a flow state and the lightness and everything. But I think if you're going after something that's relatively big for you in the moment or a large goal, then it needs more constant effort. And we can also go one level deeper into the idea of the doer. Yeah.
Mm.
And do you perceive yourself as the doer in general? So there's a question coming in, another question. I'm going to translate it into English. Let's say it like this: is effort the way until the limit of the I, and grace is what's happening, let's say, after this boundary or limit? Just have to read this again. Um, do you want to jump in there, or should I? Good.
I
Go.
think because you opened up the subject, maybe we can answer that question in a moment's
Mm-hmm.
time, because I think you came to a very important point that is also connected to the question that came in, so are you the doer? Like, are things done through you, or do you identify with your actions, so to speak? And uh, then that is one thing that a lot of people believe in, like we've been raised in believing in our, like, suit of, I'm this profession, I have these and these roles in life, which become like suits to ourselves, and identifications to ourselves. So to see that part of what is driving us is not really created through our roles or our beliefs in our roles, but from a deeper level, takes a lot of kind of exclusive work, I think, to in meditation and understanding life, so to speak, and believing in something bigger than ourselves, also.
Yeah, I try to explain this with an example. So let's say somebody is a lawyer, yeah? And then through circumstances in life, he loses his license as a lawyer, yeah? And he has built a huge identity around being a lawyer, yeah? And if grace can come in, and maybe also after a lot of suffering because he cannot do what he thinks he is, because it goes that deep. Identities can go that deep that you say, no, it's not what I'm doing. It is what I am. I am a lawyer. That's the foundation of my identity. Yeah.
Mm,
And maybe because he loses his license and basically grace comes in, that he loses his license and changes the route of his life.
mm,
It goes into a different direction. Maybe then let's take this example. He comes to a Buddhist monk, and this Buddhist monk explains to him, "Oh, you lost a huge part of your identity, but this is not your life. This is not you. This is just what you're experiencing as you and your life."
mm,
And sometimes for people, since Werner also asked about grace, sometimes for people in the most difficult situation, grace without them having done too much on the surface level, yeah, something is coming in and is changing the direction of their life completely. This is also something that can happen.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that grace always comes as to the rescue, so to speak. That grace comes to the rescue for something going in the wrong direction. I mean, how do we know it's grace, so to speak? Because we're talking here effort versus grace. So let's go a little bit more into that direction. What is grace to us, and or what does it mean? Really? Is it an intervention? Is grace always an intervention of some kind that we experience that we don't want from an egotistical point or from an identification with the life we lead?
Yeah, I think you said something, it's not going the right way or something. The
Yeah.
question is for whom?
Yeah.
It's like if it's not going the way we planned it exactly.
Mm.
This is also something that's very interesting because how flexible are we in general to our life's path and what's happening? So sometimes I explain this to people like you're driving down a slope, like in a, skiing race. And sometimes there is one, um, what is it called? This
Flagpole or
flag post, yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
And then there's the other one. And you have to be so flexible to go through them. But sometimes we want to go this way. We want to go the straight route to something. And this is also not ideal because then we are not staying flexible. And grace can come in many forms. Grace can come into our life with an intervention that we see on the outside. It can come in the form of, wow, we have a realization about something or about ourselves and our life. It can come as a present, but in general, it's considered something that's beyond physical or human power. Yeah, it's you can call it also divine intervention. But what I saw in general is that people who give their best and do the effort and do a lot of praying attract, in general, I'm not saying this applies to everyone, but they attract grace more than the people that are being lazy. Yeah. This is my observation in general.
So what are you saying? Effort attracts grace.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
would say that on
Okay.
some level.
Okay.
It's like the example if you're, um, let's say you're having a guru, yeah, and it's like calling your mom, yeah, calling your guru is like calling your mom. Can I have this? Can I have this? Can I have this? And if you're doing this uh, for a long time, then there will be a response. And this is also the effort. If we are still in the position that we consider ourselves the doer, of course we have to bring in a lot of effort.
So what I'm understanding when I reread Werner's question is that he's asking, is effort breaking us so grace can swoop us up? So that's how I understand the question. Is that what we're trying to say here?
It can be that way,
Mm,
yes, but
mm,
it also can be the way in this way that grace comes to somebody who never had anything to do with any spirituality, but there it gets very tricky, maybe not consciously, yeah. But there are so many deeper levels of the divine working and also different time frames
mm,
that we cannot really judge from the outside. Yeah.
mm. So I think this conversation is all about like Sometimes I feel like when I notice that I have no choice in life, about the things I need to do, and I don't really exactly like the way I have to do them, not on my timeline, so to speak, um, then it feels like a little bit I'm powerless, like that sensation. But we're not talking about being powerless in the whole. It's just like becoming, like doing our work. Is that what we call also effort?
It's the question what you define as our work.
Like our dharma, like, the work that needs to be done through us, so to speak.
That's also a complex question because sometimes we need to do stuff that's not directly our dharma to fulfill our dharma.
Okay, okay.
So
Mm.
it's not that straightforward. And maybe Werner can also jump in and write a little bit more if this answered his question or if it's something else.
Yeah, yeah, please. And if anybody else has questions or comments, do engage. Feel like, you have time here to talk to us about this subject. Hmm.
I can jump in and say a little bit about myself, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
or tell a story personally out of personal experience. So it's since Neem Karoli Baba is consciously in my life, yeah, to take this example, he made me work way, way more than I ever thought I could. So this is, I think it's not like that for everyone, but the people who know what I'm talking about know what I mean. So let's keep it at that. But there was also a funny thing when before this YouTube live here, I put one of my guitars away and then I thought, where is this guitar? Where is this guitar coming from? How did I get this guitar even? Yeah. And it was it was a miracle because you see, okay, sure, it's here. And of course, from the outside, you can say, I bought it. Yeah. But if you then after a while look at it and think, oh, it's all a miracle. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is guaranteed and nothing is something like that you should take for granted. Yeah, I think in life that you have.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different graces. I definitely see that, too. There's millions of stories I have. I feel sometimes myself, even the simplest thing of getting a job that I never thought I could get, like, and it was just kind of lined up and it fell into place and it was true magic to me, there was everything was kicked out of the way. It didn't make sense from an outside perspective, and that is grace to me, or a miracle. And I think if I want to think back of what we're trying to talk about here around effort versus grace, we called it, it's not a battle between the two. It's more like accepting the one, the effort is what we can identify with, if you want to call it, like that's what we can do. But in the end, we need the grace for some things to work uh, out. Isn't that what we're saying? Not always, but it feels like that.
Yeah, it's also one thing that I really love to say is we have to dance with the divine, which means with all the ups and downs and so forth, until we dance as the divine.
Hmm.
So we dance with the divine until we dance as the divine. And yeah, this also means coming back, fully coming back home to yourself, means dancing as the divine. But it's still a dance, and it might not look different from the outside.
Yeah. It's like our song that we published, the poem of Rumi, to know the dance, you must be still. and to be still, you have to dance, So there is no either or, so to speak. Yeah, it requires both to stay in motion and become in motion, totally receptive, and also from the silence to see the motion coming. Mm. The movement, the direction, so to speak.
We can also talk a little bit more about success. Maybe that's interesting. So, Uli is jumping in and is saying something. If I feel we are under constant grace, so much more could go wrong. This is also an interesting approach if you look at it like this, because you never know what would have happened if the divine would not have intervened.
Yeah.
And so in general, I think I can say I'm thankful for every day that things go right, or work out. Uh, and yeah, that's also grace.
Yeah, the whole thing is like the dance consists of, Uli, I want to kind of jump into that idea, that we sometimes we enjoy the dance and the grace and because it's easy. And then, when things are, we want to move them our way, then we don't sometimes see that there was grace in stopping us or changing our minds. So, hmm.
There's also another question from Werner. I'm gonna translate it again. Can your own striving or your effort also be grace? Can it be an expression of grace? Yes, it can be an expression of grace, because if you can do the effort still and you're healthy, you can strive to something. Also, this to me needs a lot of grace in your day-to-day life. If you, for example, if you're healthy, if you have the means to do something, if you can follow a certain path, if you, I think an immense grace is if you find a true guru, like a real guru. This is unbelievable grace. And yeah, it's grace that you can strive for something. I was talking to a friend, or with a friend, and we talked about, for example, somebody who is completely depressed, does not have or hardly have any visions anymore about the future, about something positive that's really loaded with positive emotions. Let's say it like this, for example, if you want to give a seminar in front of 50 people, 100 people, or you want to play in front of people. This is all loaded with positive emotion and still a vision. So the inner fire is still burning. There is something that wants to manifest itself. And so it's still grace that you're having this. If you have a vision for your future, it's grace.
Kind of brings me back to my Ayurvedic and yogic studies, Richard, because what you're talking about is tejas, that discerning internal fire that kind of can burn through a lot of the stuff. And in Ayurveda, when you talk about, people who suffer from like lethargy of the mind as a form of the depression, it means like there is so much dampness in the system, that the fire can't get through and burn through it, because what you call the means of a goal and the direction and the positive vision is at the end kindled by something inside of us, and that fire can be dampened. So all the practices that there are, mantra, meditation, movement, whatever you call it, staying radically aware at points of the day of your actions are tools to keep the fire, in check and remove the dampness. Yeah, that's being caused through many things. It's not only caused by the mind, it can also be caused in different ways, but that would be too much at this point. Mm.
Yeah. And Werner writes, thank you for the answer. Thank you, Werner, for the question.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, do we want to talk about finally about success? What
Yeah.
is success? And how, I mean, we know that we're driven by goals, and there's so many not matrices, they are matrices, there are metrics we use these days. I mean, there's so many apps that tell you, you know, you how to kind of number up your life. So we are more and more getting pushed into a direction of seeing success as something like a number in front of us, you know, like the right income or, you know, the right weight, body weight, or whatever it is, the right blood pressure. But I think you see success differently, Richard, as do I. So maybe you want to talk about your perception of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't, in general, for goals and for your own definition of success, I would not look so much on the outside. I would go inside yourself and look there, what's really important for me, not because somebody else told me from the outside that is important, but what's important for me, what are my ethics in life, what is my vision of a good life, because this is also very different for different people. And if you can be honest with yourself, because let's say it like this, maybe also your parents told you this is important and this is important, but maybe it's not important for you at all. So I think it's going inside, becoming very still and look what's arising, what starts to stay with you over a longer period of time, and go for this and follow this. How do you see that?
Success, how do I see success? I think success comes also in different features. Sometimes it's wrapped in numbers for me, but when I look deeper into the numbers and the feeling that's behind it, because maybe it's a sort of gratifying feeling. Let's say, like, you know, I want to lose weight. Let's say that, you know, that's easy to. So I'm going to look at my weight and say, like, this is how much I want to lose or gain, whichever way you want to go. And then that feeling, like, you know, the number is sort of like my carrot that is dangling in front of me to go into effort. But at the end, what I'm truly chasing as such, you know, or looking out for is that feeling of, you know, maybe when you have too much of lightness of being, effortless going through the day, or if you need more weight to be more solid in life, to be more present in life. So yeah, I totally agree with what you say. One can get hooked on one thing and doesn't see the second layer of it. You know, why we're doing this. This is what you're saying. You know, how does it make you feel? What does arise in that mm, in that goal for you on a deeper level?
Yeah, and I think also you cannot just go to the end of your goal, yeah, or visualize that you reached your goal without physically reaching your goal, because it's still a concept. You have to walk the walk and not only talk the talk or visualize the talk. That's not enough. Visualization can help you sometimes, but it's not the whole thing. There is also a different experience that you need to have physically.
I think that's interesting because Joe Dispenza works a lot with that, you know, like kind of putting your vision as an image into your subconsciousness that will help you to get there. What do you think of that?
It can help some people. I think you have to find something that works for you. But what I basically mean is that you cannot fake reaching the goal. You either reach the goal, for example, you want, let's take a very physical example. You want a certain kind of car, and then you sit in this car and you touch the steering wheel, and you cannot fake this. And you can also not be just uh, saying, okay, I don't really want this, because then you're just left with unfulfilled karma, as I would say. And that's tricky too. So being honest with yourself is not easy, but it starts there. You cannot say, I don't want something if I want it.
That
Yeah.
reminds me of the story about the Gayatri mantra. I'm sure I told you before, but when I learned the Gayatri mantra, I learned it with an American, and he was saying he had this client, and he gave the Gayatri mantra to somebody, and what they wanted was health, like better health, and then he was chanting it, and he says like nothing is happening, but somebody came by the door and kind of offered him, I think, money, or I, it's like about 20 years back that I heard the story, but in some ways, something physically was offered that could have made him go to a doctor and get a prescription for something that makes him better, feel better, So this is what you're talking about. Instead of saying the mantra itself needs to do that, the mantra will put something in action so you can get into the physicality of doing the things you need to do to become healthier, so to speak.
I think it's you have to find what works for yourself, and this is also the meaning to me. If you're doing, for example, a mantra practice, you're not doing it once, you're invoking the divine or a certain aspect of the divine and asking the divine for something over a long period of time. And this is also effort. Of course, you can call this effort if you like, but it's also doing something inside of you. It makes you more aligned with the divine. And also your decision making will become more aligned. Um, And I think it's good to have a certain kind of practice, whatever works for you. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, I think we kind of touched on the subject effort versus grace. And if there's nobody there to ask for a question, or if there are people there, but if you're happy with this sort of overview on effort and grace on your path of success, we'll leave it at that, maybe until next time.
Yeah, we wait just 1 or 2 minutes if somebody wants to ask another question and see what happens. So I think I want to come back to the Buddha example again. Yeah, so we close the circle. You have to find the right way to tune your string perfectly. And this might need some effort. You can try, and maybe it's a little bit too, you tune it too high, it breaks. You tune it too low, it's not working out. So you have to find this, and this also takes some effort, but this is the zone that the most progress can happen. That's my experience, yeah. And sometimes, yeah, you have to change the strings. It's not the strings always can stay the same. And maybe you have an instrument that has more strings, yeah? Not one string, then you have to tune more strings. And it's the same with the harmonium. You have to apply the right pressure to get enough air and not too little air. So it's an art form. The whole thing is an art form. Okay, so I think there are no further questions. So thank you everyone who was in this live chat.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be back soon with another live sessions. If you enjoy the conversations, please feel free to share it. It's there. It can be listened to again. And yeah, have a beautiful day, and we see you again.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you.